Okay, everyone, good afternoon. This is Keith Cupp, the CEO of Gravitas Impact, coming to you from Portland, Oregon. And today on the Global Business Leaders Forum, we have a special guest who comes from the position and the experience of having built a successful business, exiting, and now is going to be talking to us about shaping your company to survive and preparing to thrive for the future as we go through the changing circumstances with COVID-19. What we like to do on these webinars is bring you leadership worldwide as well as content that will help you build an incredible company. So we have two audiences listening in. We have those who are listening live right now, clients and coaches, as well as those who will be listening on the recorded version. If you're listening on the recorded version, make sure that you download the tool we'll show you in a moment so you have the tool to go with the webinar. Okay, with that, next slide, please, Michaela. And today we have Kempton Schwab. Kempton is currently the managing director of STS Capital Partners, but also he's been a business owner, as I mentioned a few moments ago, exited successfully. And then in his career also, he's done business in the United States, private sector, as well as in the EU. So he has some very deep international experience. He's also a YPO, a Young Presidents Organization member, and current officer in the Southeast region. And he's also a highly rated speaker and high demand on the YPO circuit. And Kempton is an expert at helping owners prepare their business for a strategic exit. Kempton, welcome to the webinar today.
Thank you very much, Keith. I really appreciate the kind introduction. You know, this is supposed to be fun, so let's make it as much fun as we can. I really appreciate you guys having me, and feel free. I think that Michaela's going to manage the deck and then also Q&A. So a lot of what we're going to do today is really fun and enjoyable for me because it goes into my past as an executive operator and some of the times that I had to go through, which were crisis created, and able to kind of shape and distill down the business that I ran twice to its foundation and then build it back up. Once in 2001 and once again in 2008. So we're going to talk about some of those experiences today, as well as some of the lessons learned. And hopefully you guys can take from this discussion something to your clients that are relevant, that is relevant for them today. So with that in mind, if we could go to the next slide, Michaela, thank you. That's my cell number and my email. So feel free to connect with me after the webinar. You know, if there's any additional commentary you have, questions, Q&A, I'm happy to engage beyond just this, this current discussion. So next slide.
And Kempton, just real quick, what I'll do is I'll monitor chat for questions as well as along the way as we have the conversation. Every now and then I'll just nudge in and ask you to go deeper, wider in a few areas as I see information coming in. Back to you.
That's fantastic. So what I want to do is kind of weave real life experience into the material you see on the deck. But in this current environment, and I'm seeing this particularly in the YPO space, that there are a lot of chief executives that this is their first situation where they've had to deal with either a reduction in force or a downsize or a potential, catastrophic event to their companies. And so what we want to talk about today is right-sizing your business for the current economy and then building it for the foundation for the future. And so it's really down to two parts. And the first part of this is going to be, right-sizing the business given the current circumstances. So, in a lot of instances, a lot of owners immediately go to expenditures when they have to deal with a crisis. And so in my own experience, I had to face reduction in force both in 2001 with the dot-com bubble and again in 2008 running a custom software development company. And in that situation, I made some mistakes in 2001 that I didn't make in 2008, and hopefully I'll be able to share some of those experiences with you that will be meaningful for your clients. So if we could go to the next slide. So whenever the situation arises like we have today, and we face, a situation where our revenues have been depleted or they have been put on pause or have been catastrophically affected, you need to look at your business from the revenue side first before you get into the expense side. And a lot of mistakes are made when owners or executive operators or a combination thereof go immediately to reduction in force and slash and burn their expenses without thinking about the revenue side first. So what I would advise you guys is to, when this situation occurs, act fast, but without emotion and with a lot of rational, and take advantage of the opportunity that presents itself in a crisis like the COVID-19 virus. So when I say, draft the revenue side first, what I'm talking about is literally looking at who is paying the bills. And very few clients or very few CEOs often think about their customer base on a P&L basis, customer by customer. They think about, well, we have X amount of revenue and we have Y amount of expense, which leads to some degree of EBITDA. What we want to do when all of this is disrupted is start on the revenue side first. So what we want to do, and I can remember in my previous life, the first time I made a tremendous mistake because I was a minority owner running the business, and the first person that I thought was eligible for termination and reduction was the son of the founder of the business, because he really contributed nothing. And so immediately we put his income back on the table because we didn't need him anymore. Well, that was an error of epic proportions for me because he was an untenable fire. So there's no way for me to actually execute on that termination. So what I would say is start with your owners first. Make sure the owners understand what is acceptable and what is not. Once you identify with the owners of the organization what the financial tolerance is, then you can begin the exercise that I'm going to talk about now, which is beginning with the revenue side of the business. So from a revenue standpoint, I can vividly remember writing up on a whiteboard, this is our largest customer, this is how much it costs for us to support them, and this is the net from that client. And then number 2, and number 3, and number 4. And we had, north of 100 plus customers in our organization. And what that exercise allowed us to do was looking at it on a client by client basis and realizing who our really valuable customers were. And then also we looked at understanding what the revenue generators would be in the future and identifying, who we wanted to keep and then who we wanted to make sure we won. And we used a litmus test of an 80% or greater likelihood that that potential customer would contract with us. So the key components are the revenue generators of the business before we get on the expense side. So let's go to the next slide.
Hey, Kempton.
Yes.
Question. Okay. So when you talk about looking in the future, how far in the future would you recommend looking at? And now think in terms of where we are with COVID right now. We've been through the crisis phase. Companies have got their PPP. They have a measure of stability for a period of time, but they may not be ready for the long-term future to thrive. So they have time to breathe and look at the revenue equation, which many companies probably haven't. So you're challenging their thinking. How far out would you recommend they plan and why?
It depends on the business. So for example, I would look at the life cycle of the client contract. So whether that's a year-over-year contract, whether that's a 3-year agreement, whether it's an agreement that can be terminated within 30 days notice. And I think that gives you the cycle of what you need to look for in the future. So it's really contract based. So if you've got a 3-year agreement and your customers are paying you, then you might have some more time versus if you have agreements that can be terminated in 30 days and you don't know whether or not they have the ability to pay, you might have to react more rapidly. So it really is a case-by-case basis, but it's the kind of the ingredient I would seek to find is the contractual terms that you have with your customers versus anything else.
Okay, thank you.
With that in mind, as you list out your clients, and this is really important because a lot of people don't do this proactively, they have to do it on a reactive basis. They never realize that the 80-20 rule is in place and that the bottom 20% of the customers are really not profitable. They're actually loss leaders. And you keep them often as clients for reputational purposes. We don't want to be in the business of terminating our client contracts, so we continue to support them. There is nothing wrong with renegotiating agreements with existing customers or actually letting them go. I can remember, believe it or not, in 1999, I inherited a bit. I didn't inherit it. I was hired to run a business that was in the payphone business. And I had a cell phone. And I realized that the payphone business was not a good business to be in. So we had clients that were paying us a percentage of money that went into payphone. And ultimately what we had to do was we had to shift them to a payment model that was acceptable for us for the consulting services we were providing in the public communications business. So it's okay to go back and renegotiate. And I can remember my personal conversation with a small business talking to Circle K, the large convenience store chain, and getting to an amenable agreement that was profitable for our business, providing the services that were valuable to them. And that's an okay exercise. And it's often welcome when you tell and are transparent with your customer base that this is not a contract that is sustainable for us. And so as long as you're transparent and clear with your clients, you'll find that they're amazingly receptive to working something out, provided that you are delivering value to them. So don't be afraid to renegotiate or terminate agreements with clients that are loss leaders. Next slide, please. So again, as I said, the owners need to decide the financial tolerance and then engage key management. And when I say engage key management, you need to make sure that you're drafting the team that you want around you. And the point being is that you are drafting that team based on core competencies of their capacities, not necessarily their experience. So for me, what I went through was evaluating, I wanted high integrity, I wanted high intellect, I wanted high work ethic, and I wanted a good, friendly team. And so I cared about, the personalities, the people that we wanted around us. So we built a team at the top that was very strong in all four of those characteristics. And then we began to look at what they could or could not do, and then the people underneath them that would sustain and we wanted to be a part of for the future. And so you match the talent to the demands of the business. And what I mean by that is that you might, I'll give you a true story. The lady's name is, we'll call her Patrice. But Patrice would, in a traditional experience, be someone that would be basically let go. But Patrice had a unique skill. Patrice could get us as a leadership team in front of any organization at the decision-making level that we wanted. She was amazing on the telephone. And so though Patrice probably cost us at that point in time $5,000 a month loaded, she was invaluable because we could be able to put our business model as we reconstituted it in front of other organizations for future success. So we retained Patrice, not because she was amazing at what she was doing today, but what she could do for us in the future. So I want you to think about, when you reconstitute who remains with the business, the core human characteristics of them as a person, as well as what they can do. So don't just think about, the short term, well, this person is in operations, so we have to keep them, or this person is in sales, we can let them go. You have to think about what are their core characteristics of a person and how can they fit within a reduced force and a selected team. And then the other thing is that soft terminations are palatable. So in a lot of situations, a soft termination, and what I mean by that is it's okay to preserve the reputation of the business by telling someone that, hey, listen, we cannot keep you long-term, but we're not going to necessarily let you leave immediately, or we're not going to necessarily reduce you in force today. We would like to allow you to continue to work with the organization, fulfill some really much needed, basically tactical tasks, but we want to free you up to go find something else, because in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, we're no longer going to be able to afford your services. And I found in multiple experiences with the high integrity people, they were refreshed when you told them, instead of here's a severance, go good luck, you said, hey, listen, we're going to keep you around for a period of time, continue to perform at this level, but you need to start looking for another occupation. It was well received. Human beings are resilient and take advantage of that. and be truthful, transparent, and honest with them, and you'll be amazed that you can preserve your reputation and build a strong foundation for the future. Next slide, please. So after you've, in essence, inventoried the client base, you've looked at the P&L of the business, and you've decided, what you want to do, we're going to dissect the DNA of the company to understand what our true core competencies are and make sure that we are doing what we're best in the world at doing. So, for example, you might have a refreshed opportunity as a business leader to look at your company and realizing that you're providing a set of services in a specific industry that you could apply those services into a different industry, which is in dramatic need of what you provide. So an example of that being that you might do cybersecurity as a subscription. And in today's market, you might be amazing at internal cybersecurity for yourself, but you've never thought about providing that externally. And so this is a chance when you have to pare down your business of understanding what your true core competencies are and putting them forward in a business model for the future, understanding the value versus cost equation, which we'll speak of later. So inventory, not only your client base, but also your core competencies and understanding what you're truly best in the world at doing, and then build your business up from there. All right, next slide, please. Execute your plan rapidly. I cannot emphasize this enough. A lot of businesses get lost in analysis paralysis. For example, businesses that are accrual-based think that they can accrue revenue for the future, and they may not have the cash to do it. Businesses that are cash-based may have taken cash, and they don't have the services to actually deliver for them. So you have to act rapidly and avoid the analysis paralysis. It's okay to do the elementary work and manage the business almost like it's a checkbook. We have this much income coming in, and these are the expenses required to support that level of income, and this is what's left over. And we have to decide what we're going to do with that, or if we can't afford to keep certain things. So it's not just about job descriptions. CEOs, I've jokingly put in this slide, CEOs can become receptionists. Receptionists can become salespeople. Salespeople can become operations managers. And data entry can come from any sort of place. But once you've cut the team down and you've rallied the group, then go ahead and fulfill the obligations of the organization regardless of what the historical job description was. So I put something at the bottom there called the Dunkirk effect. And those of you that are students of history know that Winston Churchill took the creative and aggressive approach to liberate the British Expeditionary Force from Dunkirk, utilizing fishermen and other people that had vessels that could ferry troops from the beach to larger naval vessels in the sea. And what most people thought was the largest loss of World War II for the Allies ultimately became the beginning of victory. And so utilizing people that normally caught fish to ferry troops is okay, and it can be foundational and rallying for an entire nation. And in that situation, the freedom of the world was at stake. And that leadership, that creativity, and that direction afforded the foundation of over 250,000 soldiers to be saved, and then their ability to build up, along with the United States entering the war soon, a formidable force to obviously address the Axis powers and win World War II. So I think Keith put in a nice little picture there. So Keith, I'll stop for a second, see if there's anything that you'd like to add or ask me about at this point in time.
Yeah, so one question. When I want to go back to actually two things. There will be times when you may keep someone who's more technical, but also there may be times when you have an A player that is not in a critical skill for the future. You may need to transition from the team. Any comments on how to do that so you maintain the relationship for the far future?
Yeah, so let's go back to those core competencies of the human beings that we want to keep on the team. So if you have an A player that is truly a valuable asset to the organization, and they have high integrity, they have high intellect, they have high work ethic, and they're just a genuinely good person, then you can put that A player for a temporary period of time in a B job. and they will flourish in it well, and you can retain them and then build them into something that they are more accustomed to if they want to be a part of the group. If the A player has an ego that's non-sustainable, then you may have to let that A player go and go wish them well. And just make sure you do it in such a way that's open, honest, transparent, which leaves the bridge intact with them personally, so that whenever they do leave the organization, they're not going to glass door and ultimately tarnishing the quality of the reputation of the business. So you have to look at them in a manner that is, what can they do today? What will they do tomorrow? And how, if we look to part ways, how do we do it in a manner that doesn't hurt us in the future?
Okay, great. And I really want to highlight that point for both our clients and coaches listening in. Sometimes you may need to take a tailback and put them at wide receiver for a quarter in the game until you're back into your normal game. Then you can put them back into your position using the A talent elsewhere. That's an excellent point, Kempton. Thank you for that.
Absolutely, Keith. Excellent. All right, let's move to the next slide.
Well, yeah, one other question, Kempton. Where are some of the hidden areas, based on your experience, where leaders may not be looking that there are expense reductions? So a company has looked at their revenue, they've looked at their clients, they know the team they want, and now they want to look through the secondary areas of the P&L. Any recommendations where to look where there might be cash flow that in a normal economic condition they wouldn't look for?
Yeah, so obviously the easiest one in this current situation is travel, meals, and entertainment, right? Because we're not out and about. And so our business development is often done by Zoom. But I highly recommend that you do not slash and burn all of those expenditures that might not necessarily drive direct to the bottom line, because they are required expenses for the future growth of the business. So though travel, meals, and entertainment could be easy to cut on its surface, it may be harmful for the future. So other areas are clearly, you can, if once you rally the team, and I cannot emphasize this enough. So in the two situations I went through, the team of decision makers, the first time around was 5, the second time around was 9. But once the ownership and the executive leadership got in a room together and we began working as an entity of 9 people, distributions were in play. Salaries of us were in play. Deferred comp was in play. So everyone kind of rallies together to then look at our own expenditures and what we can do for ourselves to make sure that we live exactly what we're preaching and that we're not reduction in force and paying ourselves exorbitant bonuses. We are honest, open, transparent, and we're not doing anything to the team that we wouldn't accept for ourselves. So maybe you have a CEO who's being paid $500,000 a year, and he might look and say, hey, listen, I really don't need a paycheck for the next 12 months. And that saves $500,000 in payroll. So you want to make sure that the people around you embrace what they can do, and then you might reward them with additional equity in the future. So there's all different ways to cook this recipe. You just got to understand what the recipe is right for your clients and your businesses. And then once you know the recipe, then you can put it together. So expenses beyond payroll are things that can be looked at, but they need to be looked at wisely so that we do not put a mortal wound in the business for future growth.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kempton. Keep going.
So now, in essence, we've cut the business down, to refresh. We've decided the people that are going to stay with us. We've decided the clients we're going to keep. We've renegotiated the customers that we need to negotiate, and we are now ready to build for the future. And what I cannot emphasize is I'm amazed as I work in, really international mergers and acquisitions, how few businesses are well structured and well prepared to be looked at for an acquisition. And so when I say memorialize the reality of the operation, document the business plan, document the forecast for the future, formalize all your agreements. You'd be amazed at how many organizations have handshake agreements. They don't have employee contracts. They don't even know where the copier contract is. So take this opportunity to really build a solid foundation for the business and modify legacy behaviors, both internally and externally. So if we realize we're really good at, let's say, writing software, we're an amazing internal software development firm. Well, maybe we need to offer custom software development externally. Well, let's make sure that when we do that, we build agreements for the external offer of software development in a manner that is truly good for the long-term value of the company, not just for its existing shareholders, but for the future value of the business. So as legacy contracts lapse that are not up to par with what we want for the future, let's renegotiate them and let's migrate them to improved processes. Let's maintain that inventory of the business and let's document our business model, our roadmap, and then let's revisit it with regularity, whether that's monthly, quarterly, or annually. At the most infrequent time would be annually, but would recommend a much more rapid pace than that, probably quarterly at the latest. All right. Next slide, please. So when I talk about becoming the most valuable entity, not just for the current, but for future shareholders, this is a maturation process of any enterprise. And I cannot recommend this highly enough. And it's really difficult for people to get their arms around. So now that, in essence, you've reconstituted the business, you've identified your core competencies, you've laser focused your business model, you've kept the team of leadership and employees that you want. You've prepared for change in the future. You've got a cadence of meetings that you're going to embrace internally. You're going to see what's happening, and you're going to be able to pivot, and you're going to make decisions proactively and react accordingly to current circumstances that can't be changed. You've identified and you've quantified the value versus cost equation. And I want to spend some time on this because very few people identify the value versus cost equation and price their services accordingly. I used to teach a class, a business level, entry level business class at a local school. And an exercise I would do with them as freshmen in college is I would have them take out their cell phones and I'd have them take out a piece of paper. And I would have them write on the piece of paper, what would you pay to keep your cell phone per month? Out of your own pocket, not mom and dad, what would you pay to keep your cell phone? In essence, that's treating them to the value of that cell phone. And you'd be amazed. Some people would pay, let's just say $400 or $500 to keep that cell phone, and other kids would only pay $10. And so you had this experience where the students had to analyze the value of the cell phone for themselves and then document it. Well, every business should price their services or their products according to the value delivered, not just for what it costs them to do plus the margin. So if you can pivot your mindset to what is this business and its services worth to the people that are paying for it and price it accordingly, then you can make sure that you capture the value beyond just what your margins are north of your cost. So it doesn't really matter if your margins are, let's just say 500%, if you're delivering 1,000% of value to the paying customer. So identify, document, and understand the value versus cost equation of the business. So for example, how much do you think Zoom is really worth today? And what would you pay for a Zoom subscription facing the competitors that they're out there versus what they might price it as? And so Zoom is obviously growing in value because they've created a situation where they're there, and you could probably expect Zoom pricing to increase in the future because the value is going to go up. So what is the value delivered by the products and services of the company, and how are we pricing it accordingly, not based on our expenses? And once you do that, then you can begin to think at the next level, what is this business worth to someone else? So in my own experience, we provided technology solutions to business and local, or to state and local governments across North America. So we had already overcome the procurement hurdles of over 100 state and local governments. And those procurement vehicles were transferable. So the amount of money we were making on those contracts was secondary to the amount of money that someone else could make with those contracts. So though the current shareholders of the business I was running were doing well for themselves, someone else owning that company could do a lot better. And so have the foresight to think beyond the existing owners, but to future owners, and understand the value versus cost equation and what the business would mean for them. So if you're operating the business as if it is more valuable to someone else, then you'd be able to position yourselves for the current shareholders to the fullest extent of profitability. Any comments there, Keith, before we go to the next slide?
No, just looking at chat, we can keep going.
Fantastic. So in summation, let's seize the opportunity that the crisis provides. It gives every business leader an opportunity to push the reset button, to change behaviors, reconstitute the business model, really reevaluate core competencies, document, inventory the company, basically attract and retain the core employees that are necessary for future growth. A lot of people think, oh, we have to put pay freezes in place. We have to put, a 10% across the board reduction. There's so many different things that people just fall upon versus doing the real hard work, which is understanding who we want around, both from a customer and an employee standpoint, and what we do really, really well, and making sure that we pivot to support and grow our business on our core competencies and our skill sets and the value that we derive for people. So once you understand all of those foundational aspects of the company, then you can formalize that roadmap. You can prepare the business for the future. You can document your forecasts, and then you can revisit them on a monthly, quarterly, or annually basis and make sure that the team is together. And what I will say, and this is a really important thing for me personally, is whenever you get a team together, and in essence, you've done the schoolyard pick'em, where you've had the employee roster up, and you say, I want to keep Tom, I'm not willing to keep Pete, I want to retain Sue, but I need to let go of Ann. And you've gone through that process, and you've got your leadership team there, and then Tom, who you kept, says, on my team, I need to let go of this person, and I want to keep this person, and everybody's in agreement on that, then you don't down delegate the reduction in force. The person that makes the decision to let a resource go is the person that delivers the message. That keeps, in my opinion, the morale of the business at the highest level possible. That I can remember an owner, the first time I went through this was right before Christmas, basically saying, you have to cut payroll to this level. And that owner never embraced what it was like to go sit in someone's office at December 23rd and say, I'm sorry, after you get home from the holidays, you no longer have a job here. And so the respect for that owner fell through the floor. And I remember vividly that experience and saying, if I make the decision to let someone go, it's my decision, I'm going to deliver the message. And so I cannot emphasize enough, do not down delegate reduction in force. Own it, live it. The people that make the decision to deliver the message, they then embrace the responsibility that comes with that, and it lays the foundation for future growth. So in that situation, what I close with is when you basically put out the fire of a successful company and there are just ashes left, and you're going to rebuild it smartly and rebuild it wisely with the right people, the right core competencies, the right services for the right value proposition. Document it and understand it and revisit it frequently. Knowing the external and internal value of the services provided will position you for a potential acquisition. Not that your client is looking for an acquisition, but most people, I do this, Keith, on a regular basis when I give a presentation to a large group. And if we were there and people were looking online, in live, I would say, how many businesses do you think go through an exit? And it's amazing, the responses you get. I did this once in British Columbia last past year, and you get a handful of hands that come up. Some say 5%, 10%, 20%. But the reality is 100% of businesses go through an exit. They either go through the exit reactively, they're bankrupt, and they no longer can sustain the company. They go through the business by transitioning it to a new generation of owners, or they go through the business transition and the exit proactively, where they want to actually position the business for sale. But folks that run companies need to always be positioning themselves for the future shareholders, not just the current shareholders, because that exit is coming one way or another. Operate, live, and lead, knowing that that's out there, and the current shareholders will benefit along the way, and the future shareholders will pay a premium for the organization. So that is kind of the conclusion of this, and I open it up for questions, and I wanted to make sure we kept 25 minutes for questions. So we're on time.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kempton. Let me give you a few scenarios here, and I'm thinking about clients listening in, coaches, and dialogues that I've had. There are coaches on today's webinar and clients from Latin America, as well as other parts of the world, where the makeup of the business is often multi-generational. They're family businesses. Kempton, do you have any guidance for the businesses that are family businesses that need to go through the process that you've just discussed, that may have multiple family members or generations involved? Any guidance there?
Well, the first guidance I would say is make sure family members that are employed by the business deliver more value than they cost. And if they can't, then find a distribution vehicle for them versus being a hindrance to the business itself. So if you have Junior who cannot sustain or deliver more value than he or she costs, then rather than keeping them on the payroll, you may actually just distribute earnings to them. And they do not allow themselves to be a poison pill for the contributing individuals within the entity. So it's okay to let family members out of the business if they can't sustain themselves. And you can reward them through distributions.
Okay, good. Second item, you've gone through the revenue review, you've cut expenses, you have your team. Now talk a little bit about executive or sales incentives after making those changes. Any modifications or rules of thumb there, Kempton?
I think it's customized to each organization. So if the target, let's just say, for example, that you pare the business down to where it's a break-even entity for the next year, then you create incentives should we get into the black. And so you reward those that can actually create that situation where we do get into the black, and then you share that, and you share those rewards with them. So if we break the business down to where we're flat and we're then building for the future, then if we hit certain milestones with regard to EBITDA, profit, or whatever your metric is, that we then set aside and allocate some of those rewards to the people that made it happen. And in that situation, customize the bonus or the performance plans to reward those that make the most influence on the positive outcomes of the company.
Okay. And just something I've learned there too, Kempton, for those listening in, it's a good opportunity to align the goals of the business with the goals of the individuals that are making things happen. Sometimes in the normal course of business, those things deviate from one another a bit. But as you go through resetting your company, everyone, here's a great opportunity to realign your new objectives with how you compensate with incentive those who are making it happen. Kempton, we got some questions from the audience. One coach is asking, Shri, think about professional service providers, specifically coaches, trusted advisors. How are they looked through the lens of ownership during changing times? A cost, an asset, discretionary, needed? What are your thoughts there based on your experience, Kempton?
So based on my experience is the coach should have a track record with the organization or the leader that they're coaching, which they can point to, which says, hey, listen, when I started working with you, your business was a $50 million a year business at 10% margin. You made $5 million a year. And today it's a $100 million a year business and we're making, let's just say $20 million. So we've improved revenue, we've improved margin. Then if that's the circumstance, then there's some degree of material, leadership, advice, counsel that's been provided by coach to executive that can be pointed that shows what we've done as a partnership to improve the overall enterprise. And so what we want to do is point to that for continued arrangement for this future. So be able to show the value proposition that the coach brings, not just understanding it's an expense. What is the delivery and what has their involvement meant to the business, both from a personal standpoint and from an enterprise standpoint. So being able to identify that then should provide for the ongoing relationship. And sadly, if the flip side of that is the business has gotten worse and the employee or the coach or the executive that's being coached has dropped in performance, then you might want to sever your ties with them as a coach anyway.
Okay. And Kempton, I'd add to that too, additionally, is look in terms of both the balance sheet as well as the income statement, and look at the intangible value, which often you can see through the balance sheet as your coach or your advisor helped you with intellectual property, brand development, etc., both now and in the future. Then also in the P&L, how has the coach helped grow revenue, increase margin, reduce expense? And that is separate from what you are actually paying your coach. Some coaches will suspend payment for a period of time to continue to add value. And so those are two different important considerations as a company says, hey, should I bring a coach on now to help me through this, which was very prominent from 2007 to 2009. A lot of companies said, my business model is broken. I need a coach. I need a trusted advisor to reset my business model. And then in different ups and downs in the economy, my gray hair has taught me that it's a little bit different with each recession or retraction.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say, just to piggyback on that, having been a part of YPO for over a decade, I get the benefit of a forum group of 7 other individuals that are also executives in their own right, and they are my coaches. And the amount I pay in dues to YPO is de minimis compared to the value that I get for them. And fortunately, I don't have to pay them individually. But, understand the value of what you're getting and what you're providing as a coach will help the executive understand why the ongoing relationship is not just a nice to have, but a necessary to have.
Okay. Another question coming in, Kempton. If a company is, let's say, a year away from exit, the owners say, hey, I would like to exit in about a year's time frame. They may have some suitors, not at the table, but they may know who they could go to. What would you recommend they be thinking about and working on as they begin to prepare for the process of exiting their company?
Oh, great question, Keith. So there are a few things. One is, as I talked about, buttoning up the business or inventorying the company, that's very important. Having audited year-over-year financials, having all of your agreements, both employee and customer and supplier agreements, tighten up, having them for an extended period of time for the future, knowing that they are transferable. So making sure that you have your contractual vehicles in a transferable manner. And then understanding what the value you're offering to the marketplace is and ensuring that your pricing is in support of that value. And then begin to think about who is the suitor that's coming at me and why do they want to buy me? What is it worth to them? And so a lot of people fail to shift that lens from their own financial performance to the strategic lens of what is the business worth to a new owner. And what a company is worth to existing ownership may often be much smaller than what it's worth for someone else. So as an example of that, Keith, is that we represent a firm that's in manufacturing, and they're in Southern California. and they have manufacturing and warehousing in Mexico. And they're part of the Maquiladora program, which is in essence, those that aren't familiar with TSA pre-check for shipping goods from Mexico into the United States. And they have amazing efficiencies to ship their products around the world through Long Beach. So they're getting the benefit of Mexican labor and the efficiency associated with shipping from the United States. That business has tremendous value, not just to what they're manufacturing, but to someone else. So they're able to shift the lens of not just the margins they're making in the products that they're manufacturing today, but to think about what someone else that's in a higher margin business could benefit from buying them. So the more clients can get ready and button up their shops and then begin to pivot and think about what the business is worth to someone else versus what it's worth to existing owners, and the better prepared they'll be for a transaction. And then in conclusion on that, people that call you, a lot of people make this mistake, they get flattered. And I call it the founder's flatter. The phone rings and somebody gets the founder or the CEO or the principal owner on the phone and they say, hey, listen, we really want to buy your business. That immediate reaction from the leader is often, man, I am honored that that person would call me and think so much about my organization that they want to buy it. Believe it or not, that is not your friend. They are thinking about buying you because they know they could do more with it than what you can. And so the people that are entertaining suitors that actually ultimately sell and fail to realize what the value proposition that that organization has for your business is the ones that get taken advantage of in a transaction. They leave with a transaction that they think they did well with, but they missed the real value of what they could have sold that business for.
Okay, Kempton, one other area here I'll encourage companies and coaches to look is as you prepare for an exit or think about it, look for intellectual property and trade secrets, processes, patentable items, protectable intellectual property that you can go through the process of identifying and protecting to strengthen your balance sheet, your intangibles. That can be very, very, very powerful. And then also the brand of your company. A lot of companies just need to do a little bit of work on their brand to shine up their brand a little bit. And that can be really, really powerful because the company at the essence is the brand that is created with its customer base in its market. So anything you can do to sharpen that. Kempton, I'm going to have to transfer devices. I warned you about that a little bit earlier. While I'm away, could you please help educate the audience? What is the difference between a financial exit and a strategic exit, which you at STS help with? So I'll turn it over to you, and I'll be back in a few minutes, okay?
Absolutely. So a financial exit is where, a business is in an industry, and that industry has comparables, and there are comps that are readily available, and your venture capital, private equity, financial investors seek to buy businesses that are lower than those comps. So let's just say that that comp in a certain industry may be 5 times EBITDA or maybe 1 times revenue. And so your financial buyers are out there looking to buy a business at something less than that. And that is strictly looking at the balance sheet and financial statements of a company. And the investment is made to get a greater return than what the current financial statements and balance sheet show. And it's sustainable for an investor. And it's strictly done with dollars and cents in mind. A strategic exit is when a company is positioned and it understands the strategic value it can deliver to an organization that would value owning and operating that company more than the company can and the existing owners can do today. So I used the manufacturing example in the previous commentary. So in that situation, in keeping with that example, let's just pretend that they manufacture widgets, and those widgets are manufactured at $100 a widget at 50% margins. So they make $50 per widget. And the company that wants to buy them is not thinking about that $50 in margin per widget. they're thinking about, we're not going to make widgets in this manufacturing sector. We're going to keep the widget business there, but we're going to add to it items or products that might cost $25 to manufacture, and we can sell them for $300. So their manufacturing then is worth $275 per item manufactured. So the strategic transaction is not doing the comparable analysis of that existing entity on that $50 widget, but understanding that someone's going to buy them and make $275 per device manufactured in the same circumstance, and then leveraging that experience to drive the price up and the terms and conditions in favor of the seller. And so understanding the strategic valuation of a business for the future owner, not the existing owner, is how you position the company for a larger than market comp transaction. So Keith, I hope that that answers your question, but that's the difference. It's what is the business worth to someone else and who would value it the most, and finding that person on or that entity on a global stage is critical.
Okay, great. A couple more questions and we'll begin to close. Kempton, talk about to the business owner or the coach working with the business where they have a strong balance sheet. They're in the number 1 or number 2 position in their market, and they have the freedom and the privilege of looking around at some competitors that may have been weakened, that may be going down or need an exit. How would you look through that lens? What are some considerations you would give that owner to think about?
So now we're going to do what we just talked about. We're just going to do it in reverse. So we look at a competitor and we say, what is that business worth to me? What is that customer base worth to me? What can we do with that business or its customer base? And how valuable is it? And so what you then want to do is, let's just say that if we acquire that company, that competitor, that we could add, let's just say 10 million in revenue and 2 million in margin. But the business is not doing that. But you know that if you acquired them, you could do that with it. Then you might make an offer to them that's incredibly reasonable and a payback for you, which might be 1 or 2 times EBITDA, which might be an amazing multiple for them because of the current condition. And so everybody leaves that table really, really happy because you've paid a premium for it in their eyes, but for you, you got it at a bargain because you know what you can do with it. So when we advise clients that want to do roll-ups and they want to buy competitors, let's understand what the value is to the buying party and make sure that we pay something that's substantially less than that, but more than what that seller will take for the business. So it's understanding what the buyer can do with it and making sure that you price the transaction in a manner that allows them to leave the table happy, but you have a tremendous upside through the acquisition.
Okay. And so for those listening in, you're seeing some of the best in the world thinking and experience as Kempton shares from his heart right now as an STS Capital Managing Director. Kempton, one other question coming in from Jean-Guy in Canada. So after you've looked at your revenue, you've reconstituted your team, you've identified your core competencies. Earlier you talked about now look at adjacent industries where you might point those core competencies to begin to grow the top line again. What is what would be a lens to look through adjacent industry opportunities? What are some criteria parameters as you look through your core competency in an adjacent industry opportunity to manage risk as well as to embrace opportunity?
Absolutely. So, and I speak from my own experience with what I'm about to say. So when the business I was running, was really good at analyzing data and writing algorithms to see trends and anomalies in data. And let me make it more granular than that. So we were managing payphone related data. And so how many phone calls is this phone making? How much revenue is generated on this phone? What types of calls are made? Are the calls billed correctly? Are they commissioned appropriately? And we would be able to pick up trends and anomalies in that. And obviously through force, because of market changes, we had to get out of the payphone business. But the skill set was actually writing the algorithms. The core competency was understanding the software that detected all of these trends. And so rather than get into the payphone business deeper, we used those competencies to go other places. And what it was business process reengineering, automation associated with those business processes, and then the commercialization of the technologies that we built. So we knew our core competency was in creating and understanding and writing technology that picked up on trends and anomalies within vast amounts of data. We then took that core competency and applied it elsewhere. And so what you have to understand is, what are we really good at doing? And the term that I use in this is, I liken it to root cause corrective action. What is the root cause of what we're trying to solve, and why are we good at solving it? And so if we can figure out what we're really solving and what the true problem is, then we can figure out why we're the best in the world at solving that problem. We can apply that same competency in other more lucrative areas. And that's what I would encourage people to do, is think about the competency, not necessarily the output of what the service is.
Okay, outstanding. So Kempton, I want to tell a couple quick stories as we close, and I'll ask Michaela to come on and to talk the audience through the last few slides. And the reason is, audience, both Kempton and I have lost power today. Kempton, you started in a hotel across the street. 10 minutes before the webinar, you texted me, said, I've got a challenge. Talk us through that in 30 seconds.
Yeah, see, that was fun. So I'm in Dallas. I'm on my second COVID trip post March the 5th. And I was at a Hilton property across the street. And I was actually on a conference call coming into the 3:45 hour Central to 2:45 Pacific. 1:45 Pacific, and the power went out, so the internet went out, and I was like, oh my goodness. So I went to the manager, I said, can you reset your router? And the guy was like, I don't even know where the router is. And so immediately I ran across the street, and there was a Mediterranean restaurant, and I said, hey, do you guys have Wi-Fi? And the lady was like, absolutely. And so in all humor, she says, you have to buy something, and you can have the whole restaurant. So as you can see behind me, I am by myself in this Mediterranean restaurant. You may have seen an owner come back and forth, and this is what I will have when I'm done. I've bought a glass of white wine. So I'm going to enjoy that whenever this is finished.
Okay. So when given grapes, make white wine. Okay. Well done.
Exactly. There you go.
Okay. And so for the listening audience, just one other thing. Kempton and I prepared last week, and I want to tell you a little bit about the man here. We love to have leaders from around the world that have great experience in content, but are real humans that care. So when Kempton and I were talking last week, getting ready, he was eating, I believe it was a burrito that was made by his housekeeper.
No, the tamale.
A tamale, I'm sorry. And he lives in North Louisiana, but he told the story about how his housekeeper and their family were going to lose their income because of COVID. But Kempton said, hey, let me take care of you. And so he continued the employment of the housekeeper and providing them both the dignity of work and an income, when in many cases that would not be doable or just couldn't be done. So Kempton, I just want to compliment you for living that core value of caring for others. And
Thank
then
you.
With that, you're welcome. I want to turn it over to Michaela. Michaela, I can't see the slides. It's all yours to close this up, please.
All right, so this is just a quick recap of Kempton's slide with his contact information. If you have any questions from today, don't hesitate to reach out and make sure you include your full contact information in that. If you haven't already, you can download the one-pager Kempton referred to at gravitasimpact.com/shape2survive. You can download that there, and if you're a client listening on, we highly encourage you to schedule a call with your coach to discuss and analyze your responses to this one-pager.
Yeah, I just want to thank you all for your attention today. You know, a lot of leaders have not been through a crisis. I've personally never been through a crisis like this, and I don't think any of us have. I mean, unless you were alive in 1918. And so we're in unique times, and this is a chance to really reset ourselves and reset our businesses for the future. And so with every crisis comes opportunity. Please, I recommend and I encourage you to see the positive in all that's there. adjust to your core competencies and make sure they're valuable for not just yourselves, but also for those in the future that might own your businesses. So if you can shift that lens, identify your core competencies and bring them forward and really deliver more value than you cost, you'll be sustainable generation over generation.
Thank you for that, Kempton.
Okay, Kempton, we'll have you back probably in about 6 months or sooner to talk about another valuable preparing for exit topic. Until then, thank you so much. Listening audience, we do have our summit coming up, our virtual leadership summit, Building Your Three-Dimensional Leadership, coming up June 18th and 19th. We have some fantastic speakers. And most of all, the format is highly interactive. We will have some teaching by Liz Wiseman. Then we're going to put you in breakout groups and peers to discuss how to apply the content. And you'll do that with 4 speakers. And we'll have some practical tools all in a half day on Thursday and Friday. So take a look at the link and register for that. We'd love to see you in our virtual summit. Michaela, Kempton, thank you so much.